or put it in the chat.
Yep, sure, I can do that. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to officially welcome you. It's still early and I haven't had anything to eat yet. Welcome you to our workshop for today, Forming and Sustaining Successful Partnerships. We are honored to have Cheryl Borland here, this is part 2 in our partnerships and joint ventures series that we've been doing this year. So all of you participated a couple months ago in our first session that we had in Cincinnati, or hybrid, because we had that option as well. So we're excited to spend some time with Cheryl today. We've got a small, quaint group, but I think that's going to be great, though, because it's going to allow for some really great dynamic conversation and for people to ask questions that they may not be able to ask if we're in a larger room. So if you have any questions, you can feel free to raise your hand, or you can drop them in the chat and we'll respond to those questions from there. And without further ado, Cheryl, I will turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Kay. And thank you all of you for attending or who are going to watch this after the fact. I have been a corporate transactional attorney for 30 years and worked with small companies all the way up to publicly traded companies. And so it doesn't really matter the size of your company. You will at some point in time entertain either a partnering agreement or a strategic alliances. So the devil is in the detail with doing these kinds of structures. So examples of fairly famous strategic alliances are the coordination between McDonald's and Disney. So when you take your child or grandchild to McDonald's, the reason why they have the Disney toy in there from that, whatever the current version of the Disney or Pixar commercials or cartoons, movies, that is an example of a strategic alliance. The other one is Star Alliance, loyalty programs, and the various airlines. So you can get double point airline points if you stay at certain hotels. They combine their programs. Delta has one as well. And then Starbucks and Barnes and Nobles. I mean, I know it's hard to find a Barnes and Noble these days, but the reason that Starbucks is in there is because that is an example of a strategic alliance. They were very intentional about this is the kinds of people that we want to have our product in front of. And then an example of one that didn't really quite work so well is Tesla and Panasonic. Panasonic created, manufactured, and produced batteries that are used in the Tesla automobiles. They had a problem with the production rate, and as a result, that rolled over to Tesla's client credibility, where it took, at one point in time, it took 18 months to get a new battery from Tesla. Had they not had that stumble with Panasonic, then it would not have been an issue. So you have to be very cognizant of who you're doing business with in these strategic alliances. And go to the next slide. And the next one. So we're going to talk about how you put these together and some of the thought processes and some of the strategies and how you create these strategic alliances. But all of that is included in the life cycle of a strategic alliance. So it's not just putting one together. There's a strategy that goes into identifying what your strategic objectives are. What are you trying to accomplish with this strategic alliance? And what are those opportunities? Where is it going to take you? And then the next step is the deal development, putting the deal together, putting the strategic alliance together, doing the due diligence, drafting the contracts. And then finally, your strategic alliance management. Is it working? Is the person that you're in the strategic alliance with holding up their end of the bargain? And if they're not, what does your strategic alliance agreement with them have to say about performance, deliverables, dispute resolution, and then ultimately exit? So it's not just, hey, congratulations, you have a strategic alliance and you're done. It's more than that. There's a lot of strategies that goes into the creation and the performance, and then ultimately the exit to make sure that your secret sauce of your company is followed and is not in jeopardy. So one of the overarching things for how big or how small these alliances are, before you start sharing your particulars, your financials, your human, your personnel, your expertise, your assets, your business strategy, your go-to-market strategy, before you start sharing any of that, the number one thing that you always need is a very strong non-disclosure agreement. That's the first thing out of the gate before you have anything behind hey, I think this will work. Are you interested? Conversation. Before you share any of the details or provide any information, you need to make sure that you have a very strong NDA in place. And if you don't, um, anything that you share in the process of those conversations is free game for them to use. So next. So we talked about this a little bit the last time. These kinds of strategies are inorganic growth strategies. So partnering agreements and strategic alliances where we're going to focus together. I'm just going to hit on partnering agreement and on what those are. I wanted to take the next slide. So these are examples of partnering agreements, and there was a lot of questions the last session. They're master service agreements. They're master supply agreements. These are longer term supply chain types of agreements that you enter into, and you might not have realized that this actually was a kind of strategic alliance. Like, who are you going to choose to get your raw materials from if you're a production? And who are you going to use to do your marketing? And who are you going to use to then ultimately supply the end customer? These are not partnership agreements. These are partnering agreements. And there is a difference. Next slide. So a strategic alliance is a business partnership. And these are some examples of types of strategic alliances. There's a licensing agreement where you share the use of intellectual property, where you identified a company that has some intellectual property that you either want to use or need to use in the process of your growth strategy. You don't have it. So how do you get that intellectual property? You can either, if it's possible, you can create it yourself. If it's not possible to create yourself, you can identify the party that has that intellectual property and enter into an agreement with them. Your distribution and manufacturing agreements, your supply chain agreements. When you go to present or respond to an RFP, for example, to P&G, you can package together the response to the RFP. If they're looking for a large RFP, for instance, in the print world, you can package together the response to that. Where are your art files? Where are your graphic designer? Where are your pre-press? Where are your production? You can respond by bringing together the whole solution to that RFP, not just what your particular company does. And by crafting together a strategic alliance agreement between those companies that are jointly responded to the RFP, creates a strategic alliance agreement for you. Now, as I mentioned with Tesla, you have to make sure that who you're going to be responding to are in the RFP to P&G. And if you're the lead on that response and you have all these other companies behind you that you're presenting together, making sure that those other companies are going to do what they promised to do, because P&G is not going to care further down the line. They're going to come for your neck. So make sure that you understand and know who you're doing business with. That's one of the most important points for today's session. Research and development agreements. And that takes you into some joint development agreements. Marketing and distribution, sourcing, franchise agreements. These are all types of strategic alliances. And they all should have very detailed legal documents that outline what each party is going to bring to the table, what each party's duties and responsibilities are, what the dispute resolution is, what the breach and termination provisions are, what the business opportunity outlines are in order to put your strategic alliance agreement into place. So strategic alliance is really just a business-to-business partnership. You've agreed to do business. It's outlined, the scope of which is outlined in your strategic alliance agreement or your partner agreement. You remain independent except for what you have decided to do together. And that scope of project is outlined in your agreement so that both parties know that if there's an opportunity that comes that meets that core criteria for your strategic alliance agreement, that it goes first to that joint venture. You're not a joint venture, but it goes first to what you decide to put together versus the individual company, or before they can take it to somebody else. Next. So you're going to combine, a strategic alliance combines your talent, your finances, your expertise, and your knowledge. And sometimes it will bring into, it allows you to enter other geographic markets easily. It also allows you to expand with horizontal integration or vertical integration, either within your direct supply chain or ancillary complementary businesses that you can package together. Next. So these are there's two sets of 4 C's in these agreements. This is the first set of 4 C's. Complementaries. So those are complementary business propositions of the two different businesses. Your core competencies align with each other either in a vertical integration or a horizontal integration. Second, you have congruent goals. You have the same corporate culture, the same goals and objectives as each other. You're not going into competing directions. You are going to work together. You have a drive to work together. The two companies are compatible. So one of the ways that you can find a company for a potential strategic alliance is, who do you know within your network, and who are you compatible with, and who do you work well with, or who do you just like? One of the key things that's hidden underneath the whole strategic strategy and business development is knowing who you need to have in your network and within your business, but also who do you like doing business with? If there's a company that's really good about us in a certain field, but they're really difficult to work with. They're hard to get a hold of. They don't do what they're supposed to do, i.e. Panasonic. They're not well respected outside of their particular expertise. That's probably not going to be a good fit because their core values are going to roll into your core values. And if you're not compatible, it's just like dating. If you're not compatible when you're dating, don't take it a step further with a strategic alliance and get engaged, because that's what this is. You're figuring out how to put, potentially on a long-term basis, how to put your two businesses together. And you have to be compatible, and you have to have corporate engagement all the way through your company. And if you're a small company, that's easy to get. But if you're doing a strategic alliance with a large company, you have to get executive engagement all the way top to bottom, not just at somewhere along the line. And finally is the change. The world is changing, and strategic alliance have been considered to be the silver bullet to surviving the business environment that we live in today, and that is expected to extend into the next 5 to 10 years. A lot of the business structures that we see today aren't going to be around in 5 to 10 years for a lot of different reasons. Sometimes we're just the market need isn't there. Technology is changing things. AI is changing things. I had a colleague that was marketing with IBM that just lost her job because IBM decided they were going to do all their marketing through AI, through their Watson program. As a result, she lost her job. So the business environment and and the cultures are changing. And to take advantage of that change, you can create these strategic alliances. Next. So when you're collaborating with other business and these inorganic growth strategies, you can create size and scale. And that's one of the things that's always preached out to us as we attend WeBank conferences. The corporates want size and scale. They don't want to deal with the smaller companies or the new startup companies. They want size and scale for production. The way that you can create size and scale with your businesses, regardless of how big or small it is to create these strategic alliances. You have this niche expertise that you can then create a business partnership, strategic alliance with a larger company that has that size and scale, that has that production capacity, and then work together. Next. Your pain points, because there's always a pain point, there's always an issue, right? The conflict and decision making, profits. Do we distribute profits or do we invest further into the strategic alliance, the business strategy, your growth strategy? If you haven't discussed this going into the agreement, then these are the things that often come up, and these are often the things that will blow apart your strategic alliance. Making sure they're clearly outlined on the goals, responsibilities, resources to be put together, and then having the dispute resolution. What happens when you disagree? Because at heart we're business owners, but we're also people, and disagreements will happen. Goals and objectives will change. What does your strategic alliance agreement speak to as to how you resolve these issues? And then the risk of disputes, the legal challenges, the terms aren't clearly defined. That's once again as the Tesla Panasonic example. Next. Effective use of a strategic alliance, and I'm not going to read these, but basically it gets you farther faster. You're basically stronger together because you're joining resources, you're joining geographic regions, you're joining expertise. It gets you to where you want to be faster. So instead of just slowly plotting year over year, you can use these strategic alliances properly put together, properly addressed into an agreement on how you can go farther faster together while still protecting your intellectual property, your business relationships, your customer relationships, your client relationships, your supply agreements, your supply relationships. All of those things are factored into your strategic alliance agreement, but it allows you to go farther faster together. Next. And then as I mentioned before, as we were chatting, it also allows you to go into a new, different marketplace. If you're a geographic company, a strategic alliance will allow you to then develop a new marketplace in either another geographic region, i.e., we are sitting here in the Great Midwest. If we want to go to California, or if we want to go worldwide with a global expansion with a particular product or project, you can utilize a strategic alliance with a company that either physically sits in there or already has that marketplace in there, where there's comparative goals and objectives, there's comparable sizes, there's an expertise. I had a client that had a particular expertise, boutique firm, very particular expertise, and they had a certain classification with a major Fortune 500 client that they had. There was another company that were further down the supply chain, but they were trying to expand their presence within this same corporate 500 company. And they began conversations, discussions, again, with an NDA in place to see how they could work together so that this larger, less niche business that was trying to do work with this particular company was able to then utilize the boutiques firm's special classification, because the company that, and the larger company, could develop this expertise. They could take that, they could expand their marketplace offerings. However, what they couldn't do is to get this specific classification within the Fortune 500. So sometimes being small and being nimble actually works to your advantage, because there are things that you can do either independently or you can do more effectively and get the decision made faster because you have less stakeholders. If you're a large corporation, getting an answer to a fairly simple question goes through a lot of levels of stakeholders. The answer doesn't come back quickly. If you're a smaller, more nimble company, you have the ability to pivot, you have the ability to make the decisions faster, and you also have the ability to expand through geographic regions. That's, quite frankly, that's one of the strategies that my law firm has taken. They have brought in experienced attorneys in other geographic regions because we are limited on how we can approach the practice of law, because we have to be licensed in a particular geographic region. If we're not licensed there, we can't practice there. And oh, by the way, this is purely educational. This is not legal advice. But by expanding the geographic footprint, by bringing in additional attorneys and other marketplaces, the firm, even though it's a small boutique firm, are able to grow by adding offices in other regions. Example of a small strategy taking advantage of a geographic expansion. Next. So as I said, you're sharing resources, you're sharing your expertise. There's a new market penetration. Next. It allows you to take advantage of your strategic alliance partners' production capacity. You might have the expertise in design and development, and they have the production capacity. It also allows you to drive innovation. How can you outpace your competition with new solutions? As I mentioned, responding to an RFP with a full response versus piecemeal. You can drive innovation. You can take advantage of the creativity and resources and culture of other corporations, other companies that fit within your strategic plan for growth and expansion to move forward and move faster. As I mentioned, stronger together. I don't have that phrase copyrighted. I borrowed it from some political campaign. Summary of benefits. One of the other things that I did not hit on is that these strategic alliances often can then lead to a joint venture and often can lead to your exit strategy. The company that you have been doing work with successfully is a viable option to then, as you are looking to exit your business, you can then enter into conversations and negotiations with them to see if they're interested in just buying you versus sharing part of the pie. They can purchase you and then just absorb your expertise, what you've brought to the table for the scope and terms of this strategic alliance, directly underneath their umbrella. And then but like I said, there are pitfalls. If your strategic alliance agreement does not address what happens in the event of termination or breach, does not address conflict resolution, doesn't clearly outline the goals and objectives and expectations, who's going to contribute what resources, who's going to contribute the intellectual property. And is the person or the company that you're in the strategic alliance agreement, have they oversold? Have they misrepresented what they have the ability to do, to produce, to create along with you? Are there unrealistic or unfulfilled expectations? And that goes into not only production, but it also goes into their personnel. If they've committed resources to do help with the marketing and expansion of this proposition, and they don't have the personnel that can do that marketing or do that business development, then you're already starting behind the 8 ball when it comes to this strategic alliance. And the end result of this is that there's litigation. They've either stolen your clients, you're stolen your customers, stolen your vendors. They've taken your intellectual property. They've damaged the reputation that you have within the marketplace. All of that leads into litigation. And the only persons that ever win in a litigation situation are the attorneys and the experts and the accountants. And so making sure that your strategic alliance agreement addresses what happens if there's a breach, and making sure that you have the ability to recover cost of litigation for breach, that you have the ability to enforce a temporary restraining order or an injunction that prevents them from taking your business assets. That all has to be in your agreement. And if it's not in there, and if your choice of law is not in there as to where you bring this dispute, then it results in a non-effective strategic alliance agreement. And it also results in, at the end of the day, litigation. These types of agreements, as well as joint ventures, are very highly litigated. And it doesn't matter if you've been best friends and you've started these companies separately, but now you want to bring them together. Doesn't matter if they're a corporate giant and you're the David and the Goliath situation. They have a lot more resources to bring these litigation actions. And while you might be right at the end of the day, if you don't have the ability to fight fair and fight effectively, then they're gonna paper you to death and they're gonna litigate you to death. So it's important to know who you're going into these relationships with. It's important to know that you have monitored and managed that relationship. And then ultimately, you have to make sure that you have the ability to get out if it's just not working for whatever reason. Next. This is your second 4 C's. This is for the expansion into a new marketplace. So what are your customer goals and objectives? What's the competition within that marketplace? What are the costs of marketplace expansion? And what are the capabilities? Next, I'm going to go into these further. But first, I want to just take a pause real quick. Dr. K, do we have any questions or comments?
We do not have anything in the chat. Does anybody have any questions?
I do. Cheryl, I thought it was interesting in one slide how you said there's the opportunity to create new products, new services collectively. Love for you to expand on that just a little bit in terms of if a new entity is not created, a la that would be a joint venture. How do you then make sure with that new product, that new service, that if the strategic alliance ends, like who owns that particular new creation?
It's in the agreement. If you are doing it, if the result of this, if one of the goals of the strategic alliance is a joint development, whether it's software, whether it's an offering, new product, new manufacturing processes. Part of the dispute resolution, part of the termination provisions within your strategic alliance agreement is who owns this joint thing that you've created together, because it's not going to be owned by a new entity as in a joint venture. It's
Right.
going to be owned by it's going to be owned by two separate companies. So it becomes that, if your strategic alliance is the example of being engaged with somebody, doing business with, and you're engaged with somebody, this new development, this new product, technology, whatever it is, that's the baby that the two of you have had. So you need to address within the terms of your agreement, who gets that? How do who gets possession of the baby when the relationship doesn't work?
Yeah.
And a lot of that is in, the beginning conversations, because when you go into a strategic alliance where there's going to be a development agreement, sometimes there's an additional development agreement that's entered into as well as your strategic alliance agreement. I see this a lot in software development, for instance, because the intellectual property and what involved in that software that's created by these two respective companies have to be addressed in the strategic alliance agreement, and it can cross-reference the software development agreement. Is the software that's created, does it have a patent? Is it patentable?
Yeah.
Does it have a trademark? And then, part of that software development agreement can then talk about who's contributed what resources. If somebody's bankrolling it, if somebody's providing the financing for the development to drive the sprints, then is somebody else then providing the technology, the technicians, the code writers that are actually creating the code that's going to drive that software platform. And then, because these things can be for a particular, in this case, it's not going to be just for a particular product. A lot of times this will be, if the joint development works, then it can be the springboard to then create the joint venture that then will own the intellectual property software that was developed. And then it can be owned and then licensed back to the respective companies, or it can be owned by the JV at that point and licensed to others.
Yeah, great example. Will you be getting to more, call it the detail of all the documents or all maybe a checklist of what to ask yourself later on?
Yeah.
I could see a lot that you need to think about ahead of time before you really engage in this.
Yeah. And there is, I didn't send it out because it's about 5 pages long, and I'm happy to send it to you. I've created over the years like a term sheet, and it's broken out, and it's a Word document that I'll send out in a PDF. But it's almost akin to an Excel spreadsheet. Like, it identifies the two companies. So it's ABC company and XYZ company have come together to create a strategic alliance for the development of a new software program, for instance. ABC company is going to contribute these resources, finances, code writers, etc. XYZ company is going to contribute these resources. This is our marketing strategy. This is our development strategy. This is the time frame for the commitment. These are the other, and if there's any other ancillary agreements in addition to your NDA, this is when your software development agreement will also be cross-referenced into your strategic alliance agreement. So it's not just a one and done. That's why, I've had clients and people I've talked to. It's like, can you just give me a template? It's like, well, no, I can't, because these things are so narrowly tailored to
Yeah.
what you're doing. There's 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 never a fill in the blank form, because I know a lot of people just think that we just fill in the blanks. But there's, it has to be particularly tailored to what each of the companies are going to do, why they're coming together.
Mhm.
Like, what's their reason? So the worksheet is like, what's your why? Why are you interested in going into a strategic alliance? What's your goals and objectives? And not only what are your goals and objectives, Christine, but also who's the other party's goals and objectives? Since I'm going to pick on the two of you a little bit because I know you're both here. Um, you know, so if instead of having a JV with Michelle, the two of you decided, oh, we're going to do this new thing. We're going to do a strategic alliance, and we're going to come up with a new product offering, and it's going to evolve some software, for instance. What are your goals and objectives, Christine, and creating that? What, at the end of the day, what do you want to get out of it? Why are
Mhm.
you doing this? Because it takes away from your business, takes away from everything else that you're doing. What are you personally trying to accomplish with this? And what is Michelle trying to accomplish with this? And at the very start, your goals and objectives are like polar opposite of Michelle's. Don't do this.
Mhm.
Or, starting out the conversations, and you kind of outline thing, and you come up with a proposal, and you send it to Michelle, and Michelle's like, extremely difficult to deal with. If she's difficult to deal with when it's supposed to be happy times, she's going to be really difficult to deal with the further down the road you get. And this more detailed workshop, I wasn't sure who was going to be here, and I wasn't sure um, how helpful that would be. But it's like, what's the marketing plan? Because it's not just the development. What's the marketing plan? What's the maintenance plan? What's the sales? Who's going to be responsible for what? How are we going to do this? How are we going to grow? Once we have this developed, how are we going to grow from there? It's not just a one and done. As I said, there's a whole life cycle of this. And is it working? Is our marketing effective? Is our approach effective? Do we have the right resources? Do we have the right code writers? Do we have the right marketing firm to take this out to market? Do we have the right go-to-market strategy? All of those get factored into these types of adventures. And so making sure that you all are on the same page at the very beginning is one of the most important things. So as you're thinking about going into a strategic alliance, one of the first things you think about is, not only why do I want to do this? What's my goals and objectives? But who is in my network? Who do I know, or who do I need to know to get this accomplished? Because if you work with people that you either know or know of, then it's easier to really know whether or not, in the course of the development of what you're trying to do together, they have the ability to actually do what they say they can. Because there's a lot of smoke and mirrors out there. There's a lot of people that say they can do everything, and everybody can't do everything. We all know that. But how do you parse that out? Can they
Yeah.
really produce the level that you need? Or, going back to Tesla, I'm sure, Panasonic's a great company. They have an expertise in making batteries. They make all kinds of batteries, but their production facility failed when it came to producing the batteries for Tesla. And a result, Tesla took it, took the hit, because it's like, it's great to have a Tesla, but it'd be great if I could actually drive it, because my battery is dead. And I have to replace it, and it's an 18-month lead time. And oh, by the way, they're ungodly expensive because all these things that go into it. It's not just the cost of the cars. You have to replace the battery eventually.
So helpful. Thank you very much.
Okay. So going into new markets, what is your cost of customer acquisition? What kind of customers are you trying to get and achieve? And how do you get there? And like, why are you going into a new market? What is the reason? So the worksheet goes into the why, the what, the how, the when, the who's. And once you answer those questions, because when we start a business, it's always why. What's our why? What's our why? What's our why? Well, in this case, it's more than your why. It's the other questions, the other 4 questions that also have to be answered in order to have an effective strategic alliance agreement. Next. So who's your competition? And sometimes the person that you go into the strategic alliance with, that, they are in the same market. They are, for all intents and purposes, your competitor. Now, they may be a competitor in a different region, and therefore you join forces, and then, 2 plus 1 doesn't, 2 plus 2 doesn't equal 4, it's 5 in this case. It's the new math, because you have economies of scale. And you have, if you're producing here in Cincinnati and the other company is producing in California, and if you can produce in California for your California new customers as a result of the strategic alliance, your margins are better because you don't have the cost of transportation to get your product from Cincinnati to San Francisco. So, and part of the reason that you might want to go into a different region and collaborate with for lack of a better word, a competitor, is that you don't want to stay in Cincinnati for the rest of your life, and you want to, grow this, but then you also want to eventually retire in San Francisco. In order to retire in San Francisco, you need to create a financial worthiness of your business, and B, create a business presence in San Francisco. So collaborating with, for all intents and purposes, your competitors allows you to get size and scale. But you have to make sure that your confidential and proprietary information of your company is protected in these. And we can't do non-competes really anymore effectively. But Ohio has a very good trade secret statute that is now being used more and more often. Like, where are your trade secrets? Where's your marketing strategy, your independent marketing strategy? And how is that different than your marketing strategy for your strategic alliance? How do you protect the intellectual property? If you're bringing the intellectual property to the party, then how do you protect that within your strategic alliance agreement? And one of the ways, if it belongs to you to begin with, in your agreement itself, if the strategic alliance is terminated, the intellectual property comes back to you, and all rights and use and any licensing comes back to you. And the other party has no right to use it unless they enter into a whole new separate agreement to use it. And then you dictate those terms of what it needs to be. Next. As I mentioned, you've got economies of scale by collaborating. It also allows you to do some business reorganization within the business units of your company. If one unit is underperforming, but another unit is doing very well, but you need the ability to grow and expand the performing unit by collaborating in a strategic alliance with somebody else, you can grow that faster, stronger, and then ultimately divest yourself of the underperforming business unit, or just cease doing business in that market or that particular product line. And this was what I was mentioning, as technology and AI continues to change our business world the next 5 to 10 years. Exiting a business or a line of business or a business unit becomes more and more timely, because you don't want to miss the market. It's like selling like telex machines in the world of email. Like, maybe 1 or 2 of you might know what a telex machine is, but it predated fax machines. That's how you had instant communications across the world. And it was basically a key punch tape that sent the message. Obviously not used anymore because we have email. But if we don't monitor the market for the productivity of our business units or our companies, then we can lose the competitive edge that we currently have. And a lot of companies, as they're looking to exit their business, they hold on to it for too long, and then as a result, they've missed the market. No one wants their product anymore or their services anymore because the world of business is changing. It's always changing. So this is a lower risk ability to have growth and expansion within our companies without having a lot of risk, without taking 100% of the risk, because you're sharing the risk with your business partner. Next. And then capabilities. This is sharing your core competencies, your expertise with somebody else's expertise, or their technology in the instance of an intellectual property or a software program that they're going to license back to you or license to the strategic clients. Finances, somebody might be flush in finance. They might be flush in money, and they're looking to expand into a new market or a new product line or a new business opportunity, but they don't have the wherewithal to build it from the ground, or they don't want to take the time to build it from the ground. So they find someone that they can basically bankroll, and then they take advantage of that opportunity. You see that in strategic alliance. You see it in a joint venture. You see it in new business startups. Somebody has a great idea within the startup world. They have a great idea. Cincinnati is ripe with tech startups. They have a great idea. They're really good about what they're doing with their technology that they created in the startup, but they don't have the finances. So they can either do a strategic alliance where somebody has a similar line or a similar marketplace and has lots of money to then bankroll the expansion and operation. Same kind of thing. Next. So this is your template, Christine. You identify your potential partners. Sometimes they're competitors or somebody that you know in the business world. WBank is it's an excellent resource for finding these potential partners. And the kinds of collaboration, the kinds of strategic alliances that are formed as a result of what start out as seemingly random, innocent conversations at a conference often takes you places where you never really imagined. So who's in your network? Who's in your network that knows somebody that you need to have in your network? That's how you start to find those potential partners. That's how you vet them. You have to vet them. You have to make sure that they say that they are who they say they are. It's the whole Dr. Seuss, principle. Do what you do, say what you say, mean what you say. What's their reputation in the marketplace? They might be exactly what you're looking for as far as finances or personnel or other resources. But if they're a dragon to work for and with, think again before you go into these agreements. And at the end of the day, you're like, well, it's kind of where I have to go. Then you make sure to really double down on the protections that go into the strategic alliance, or start off with a particular project or a particular shorter time frame. And these strategic alliances can be for a particular project for a company. It can be for a year or 6 months with renewing terms. It can be within any project that might come in within these parameters over a certain period of time. There's so much creativity and flexibility in creating these agreements that allows you to truly tailor what you're doing and, test the water, or before you go into a strategic alliance, do a sourcing agreement with them. Does this work? Are they going to be difficult? Or, They might be really difficult, but they're really good and they're going to take you places where you never thought you were going to go. So just because they're difficult doesn't mean they're not going to be a good partner. You just need to go into it, eyes wide open. What is their reach and what is their network? Do their core competencies, they're at their core, the company's core values, just like we have our individual core values. Companies also have core values. Is their whole corporate culture and their whole corporate core strategies in alignment with yours? And there's nothing to say that those are, if they're not, that they're good or they're bad. They're just different. And if they're different and they work, then that's fine. If they're different and they don't work with what you're going to do, then they're not going to be most likely the best partner to be in this agreement. And then design your proposal. And that's that Excel worksheet that I can get to you, Christine, if you're interested. Who's going to do what? And if you can't agree on who's going to do what within the term sheet, then don't waste the time and expense of then going forward with the legal document that outlines all of this, because this term sheet basically is it's like your letter of intent if you're going into a lease agreement. It summarizes the transaction. If you can't get agreement there, it doesn't do you any good to go any farther than that. And then, set up a final meeting. Once you have the design of how you envision this strategic alliance working, then you sit down with them. Like you've had conversations, but okay, we talked about this. This is, in big picture, this is what we talked about. This is what we are thinking. This is the term sheet. This is the legal agreement. This is our proposal on how this works. Before you sit down for that meeting, and hopefully before then, you've got to have that NDA. You have the NDA and your strategic alliance, and then any other ancillary agreements. And then present your proposal. Talk about it. Do they have pushback? And it's not this is what I want, you can take it or leave it. It becomes a conversation because you're going to be working together and you're creating this relationship. The world of business is very relationship based. And this is one of the most important relationships that you'll have within development of your company. Next. So this is what goes into the actual legal agreement. Big picture bullet point, but all of these things need to be in there. The detail of what each party is going to do, whether it's resources, time and commitment, each person's obligations. How long is it going to last? And what's the scope of the strategic alliance? As I mentioned, it can be for a project, a particular project with a particular company. For instance, it's a project to go to P&G, project to go to Kroger. Or it can be, if it falls within the definition of this scope of work, then this is what this strategic alliance is going to be for. Outside of that, if it doesn't fall within the parameters of that scope of work, you're free to continue to develop and grow and run your own businesses independently. If it has a defined term, a year, for instance, does it automatically renew for another year? Or do you have to let the other party know on the other side, whether 60 days, 90 days before, that you want to continue into this relationship? If it doesn't automatically renew and you don't notify the other person, then at the end of that 1-year term, you go your separate ways. And then within the confines of your document, what resources, software, personnel, finances, go back to the various parties. The cost allocation. There's rarely a situation where I've seen where people bring equal funds to the table. It's usually an imbalance. It's somebody has cash and somebody has equipment or expertise or something else, or personnel. So If one person is underwriting the situation, then how are the profits split? What's the revenue? What's the margins? What's the expectations? What's their return on investment for finances, and what's the return on investment if you're contributing personnel or equipment that also goes into your asset contribution. There's a schedule. Should be schedules in your strategic alliance agreement on who's contributing what and whose responsibility it is if you need more money or need more assets or need more equipment to bring it to the table. If it takes more to get the final goal accomplished, or you're going to continue an operation, if it's not self-sustaining, what are the obligations of each party to continue to finance the strategic alliance? Your intellectual property rights. Is there independent intellectual property rights? Or in your case, Christine, is there going to be a software development? Are you going to create together the intellectual property? And then who owns it? And what are the licensing rights? The risk allocation. Who's going to lead that charge? How does it fall back to the two individual companies? And then most importantly, your dispute resolution. And if clients tell me, oh, we're fine, we're not worried about that, then that's generally the kiss of death, because that's when there will be lots of disputes. Your marketing and sales support. Most important, because there is not a new entity being created, is the business opportunity. And what I mean by that is if you are in a strategic alliance with another company and P&G comes to you and says, because you have an existing relationship with P&G, or you're working with a particular buyer, or you have a great meeting at a conference somewhere with P&G, come to you and say, we have this RFP, or we are doing this expansion, or we are doing, we are looking for a company to perform. If the scope of your strategic alliance falls within that definition of what P&G needs to have done, then each of you, regardless of who P&G approaches, has to go back to the strategic alliance to say, P&G has asked for this. This is what we are designed to do. Is this something that we collectively want to do together? And if the other business partner says, no, I don't think that we have the resources or the time or the commitment or whatever to do it within the strategic alliance, then you can then do it independently on your own. You cannot take an opportunity just because you are the one that you were called to perform that contract unless you have buy-in from the other party, and vice versa. If the call goes to them, they have to present it to you before they can perform it. If that's the goal of if that's the scope of work within your strategic alliance. Once again, the devil's in the detail in these agreements. If it's outside the scope, even if just a little bit, like from an ethics standpoint, you might want to say, hey, it's not really what we're doing here, but this is what P&G has asked for. You still want to kind of then give them an opportunity to say, is this something that we want to expand? Because if there's an additional market that you didn't realize, but corporations are looking for, this is an opportunity for you to take advantage of it within your strategic alliance, share the risk. Maybe it's a one-off. It's like P&G wants it only once, and they're going to, P&G has, they're the gorilla in our backyard. Some things they'll do something once. It's like, yeah, that's not really what we want. Or we want creativity, but we want creativity, but it's the way that we used to do things. They're very risk averse for a reason, but they're also a very successful company. So they might want to try something a little bit out of the box. Maybe it falls within the scope of work within your strategic alliance. Maybe it doesn't. But before you can take it on an independent basis, you have to present it to your strategic alliance. Otherwise, properly drafted, the other party could then get temporary injunction against you that prevents you from doing it. And then when you start fighting with this yourselves, which happens a lot in business, P&G is like, yeah, when you guys figure it out, let us know. In the meantime, we're going to move on to somebody else that it's not in the middle of a domestic squabble. Confidential and proprietary information is protected by your NDA. It also has protection within your strategic alliance agreement. And all the states are now enforcing their Trade Secret Act. But there's requirements that you have to follow in order to fall underneath the trade secrets. You have to protect it. You can't just be laying out on the table where anyone can see. What affirmative steps have you taken to protect that information? Have you identified it to the other side as proprietary or confidential information or a trade secret information? Just because they should have known that it was a trade secret to you doesn't necessarily mean they will deem it to be a trade secret or confidential or proprietary information. So the burden falls on you as the business owner to protect your information. What's the termination and exit strategy? How do you unwind this when you need to unwind it? Whether it's the end of the natural agreement, you come to the 1 year, like, hey, it was great, done, we're going to move forward. We're going to, not what we expected, the ROA wasn't there, whatever reason. Or you just like, I lived with you for a year, I don't like you anymore, we're going to go our separate ways. The terms of how the termination, how the unwind are going to be in your strategic alliance agreement. And what's your exit strategy? And sometimes your exit strategy is like, it was great together, but we built this, we kind of have some infrastructure there. I'm not interested in pursuing it. Why don't you buy me out? That's the other way to unwind it. Pay me for the continuing value of what we would have if we continued on. Another option. And then because you're in this as partners and have a joint collective goal, it should be balanced. This isn't one side beating up the other side. And there should be mutuality in all the provisions. So whether you do something wrong or they do something wrong, it's even Steven that you enforce it against each other equally. Because otherwise, even, and that pertains even if you're a small niche company and you're doing the strategic alliance with a large company, it still should be evenly balanced. And the terms should protect both parties equally, not the other side because they're bigger, they get more protection. That's not what this is about. This is they have something that you need and you have something that they need. This is how we can get it, see if it works, work together for the scope of the agreement, and then make sure that each party is protected from each other and, from outside sources. Next. And these agreements, by the way, are going to be really long and really detailed because they're designed to protect both parties, designed to protect what you're trying to do here. So 10 best practices, document it. Absolutely document it, because if you don't document it, you don't document it right. And I shouldn't have to add this, but I've had some experiences in the last few weeks. When the document's drafted and any of the ancillary documents are drafted, sign them. Make sure you sign them. The business divorce that's going on right now, that their accountant drafted the partnership agreement for their LLC, but neither one of them signed it. And now one of them wants out. So if you've gone to the time and expense to create these agreements, sign them. Seems a little silly, but sign the documents, because if you don't sign them, then they can't be enforced. Have lots of communication when you're starting this, when you're exploring it, as you're drafting the agreements, and then once you're operating. It's not we create it and we're done. There's a lifestyle and there's a life cycle, and Is it working right? Do we need to make amendments? Do we need to make adjustments? Is there something that we didn't take into consideration? Or is there something that we took into consideration, but we didn't consider enough? Do we need more resources? Do we need more, do we need more funds? Do we need a different go-to-market strategy? Have that communication, and you can often prevent any problems or issue by having the communication. Failure to talk about it doesn't mean that the problem is going to go away. Actually, failure to talk about it actually results in the issue becoming bigger because it don't go away. Can't ignore. And listen. Don't have all the answers. Don't be a smarty pants. Listen to the other side. What are their objectives? What are they looking for? What you think that they might be looking for, it's just the same in any other relationship. What you think that they're looking for may not be what they're really looking for. That might not be their objectives. Units might be imposing our own unconscious bias on what the other party is thinking or doing. Because we bring, all of our whole selves and our baggage to our business relationships, and you may be interpreting what they're trying to actually accomplish. So have a conversation, ask questions, ask lots of questions, and listen. Active listen. And then cultivate the relationships. Together, collectively, independently. The world of business is relationship based. We do business with people that we like. We do business with people that we trust. It's all relationship based. Our customers, our clients do business with us because they like us. In addition to, we actually have to do what they're wanting, but they do business because they could do business with anyone that makes a widget. Doesn't really matter, but they like us. So it's all relationship based. Be trustworthy, be transparent, be ethical, because it takes a whole lifetime to build up our emotional and intellectual capabilities when it comes to the world of business. It takes 1 second to blow it out of the water. So don't try and pull a fast one. Don't pretend to be something that you're not, because eventually if the other party misrepresents what they're going to do, then they're not going to then they're not going to trust you, and it's not going to be a successful venture. At a certain level, you may run into some antitrust violations. You'll need to work with your attorney and then make sure that those are addressed. And then expand your professional network. Go to the WeBank conferences, because that's where you're going to find customers, clients, opportunities, ways to expand, reasons to expand, either geographically or within your supply chain. Develop your expertise. Technology is changing our world. AI is changing our world. But there is an ethical and proper use of generative AI. And we need to take steps to make sure that we are cognizant of that. And then, what are your efficiencies? And that's in your tracking. That's in your KPIs. That's in your performance metrics. That's in your margins. Do you really have administrative efficiencies? Do you really have marketplace efficiencies? And if it's not working, what can you do to adjust it within context of your strategic alliance? Or is it then the time to call it a day? Terminate, because what you're trying to achieve and one of your objectives is not going to be met, and you can't get it so that it can be met. Doesn't make a difference. And that's really the end of the PowerPoint. Like I said, this is all coming out. So yeah, there's what's in the chat.
I think the only comment in the chat was Teresa was saying that she had to step away or she had to leave for another meeting, but she was just thanking you.
All right.
I did have a question, Cheryl.
Yeah.
I was wondering, does it ever make sense to structure your strategic alliance like in phases? Like we don't move on to phase 2 until the parties have accomplished the first 3 things, just to kind of, have some stepping stones so that you're just not all responsible for a whole lot of stuff all at once?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's part of your, your outline of what your goals and objectives are. And no one's gonna achieve all their goals and objectives like out the gate. Because you're each running your own respective companies at the same time. So it's you're not gonna, if you were making a CPG product, you're not going to start production of that CPG product and then commit to Kroger to fill an end cap in their grocery stores, right? Kroger's not going to entertain that anyway, but you start with this, you start small, you start, the smaller retailers, you start, wholesaling, you start, website, you start farmers markets or whatever, and then grow from there. Same thing with the strategic alliance. You have this whole phase and this whole objective that you think that you and the other partner can get to, but you take it in baby steps. Like, okay, this year we're going to do this and see how it works. And then part of that is also making sure that you can work together. I know you and Christine work together, but if there's a third person that you identify that can like enhance what you're currently doing together or independent, and you want to bring them to the table, make sure that you work together. Make sure that what you think that the marketplace is looking for with a strategic alliance, they're really looking for, because you might misperceive the market, or you might have missed the timing on the market. And now what you're trying to do is actually now replaced by a bot through AI, and no one's going to pay a person that the bot can do. So yeah, and then so if this works, then we go to the next step, and if that works, then the next step. And part of that is that's your life cycle. This is overall, objectively, this is what we would like to accomplish with this. These are the steps and how we get there. And there's a cost benefit KPI analysis at the end of those phases. Did it work? Did it not work? What could we have done better? What did we do that we didn't really need to do that cost us money, funds, time, resources, that what we thought that the marketplace was looking for, they really weren't. They're like, yeah, well, whatever. Like this part we really like, but that stuff, yeah, whatever. Yeah. And then that helps you to then further refine what the second step is. And then when you get to the end of the second step, you go back. You don't forget about the first step. Like, how's the first step working? How's the second step working? And then before you go into the third step, what do we need to do? Do we need to change anything? Does our strategy, our go-to-market strategy, our objectives, our goals, our point of entry, our timing of entry? Sometimes it's just time to market. Like if you're launching a Christmas product, actually the time into market is March, not January, not Christmas. Do we need to adjust our time to market, our deliverables? And do we need additional resources that, oh my gosh, we didn't really realize that we need to do this and this. We figure that out in phase 1 and 2, but we need to now plan for in phase 3. And as long as you're having that conversations, and as long as you're amending the documents along the way, and as long as you're entering into any ancillary agreements, like if it's software development, there's a software development agreement, there's a joint development agreement. Who is the owner of that IP? Or is it jointly owned? And then what happens if you no longer want to work together? And sometimes no longer wanting to work together doesn't necessarily mean that they don't want to have ownership. It just changes the roles and responsibilities. They might say, I'm fine with this, but I just want to let it be self-sustaining, and I'll take the income and revenue and stream off it. Now that we've built the software, for instance, and we have a market and we have all these license agreements, we don't really need to do anything more than other just make sure that the support is there. There's no further developments, and now it's just a revenue generating stream.
That's helpful. Thanks.
Sure.
It was interesting too. I was thinking, the size of business, what might be the appropriate, I don't know, number of headcount or revenue, however you might want to define it, because ultimately you'd want oversight. You'd want people dedicated to the relationship, while others were still working on your base business, so to speak.
Yeah.
Because, to your point, it takes commitment, it takes thought, I love the word strategy, of course, but, it takes the strategy ahead of time. And even thinking about it before you're having conversations, it's like, would a strategic alliance make sense to us? So that's why I love your template. I love the questions. Do that thinking for yourself first. Before you're even going out and looking for somebody, or having that random conversation, so to speak, and being like, oh, that could be a really cool idea to partner together. Like Michelle and I had an occasion several years ago where someone presented an idea to us, and we informally followed some of the steps you've mentioned, and ultimately decided it was not the right direction to go in terms of an alliance. But I love now, like I said, having this thought process ahead of time, the strategic thinking ahead of time. I think that makes a ton of sense, just as you're considering growing and or scaling. How's that going to be best effective for you?
And it's easy to get caught up in the moment on like a new business opportunity. And I have a client that I've represented for a really long time, and he gets very excited about just different business opportunities and comes to me. He's like, Sharon, guess what? I found this and blah, 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 and goes on. It's like, wait. So this is what you're telling me. This is what you think this is a good idea. And then, it's my job as counsel to then like pick it apart a little bit. Like, have you thought about, or what if? And then, sometimes we go forward with the due diligence, and sometimes we don't. Sometimes I'm going, yeah, this is so far outside of your core competencies of your company that it will diminish the value and the value proposition of your company if you deviate to this. And it will take so much time and energy to do this stuff that doesn't have a big return on it. It's really production. It's not design. Is that really the playground that you want to be in? Is that really the marketplace that you want to be in? Because then they're going to see you as like, oh, they're just, they just do this. Whereas what they really are trying to market is more niche, more R&D, more very high up in the innovation development supply chain versus production.
Yes, 100%, which then goes to brand.
It goes to brand.
Think about it from a brand perspective. Is this going to enhance or detract? We talk about it as the virtuous cycle of brand building. So you have what we call your master brand, what you're doing today. Is the strategic alliance going to enhance, extend, take that brand on a new trajectory, or will it take it down? And so it's something to very much consider as your organization, not just from a sales and a financial standpoint, but as your reputation and perception.
Yeah. So, one of the things, one of the examples of this is Starbucks. Well, Starbucks and Barnes and Noble, I think those are still Starbucks employees. Those are not Barnes and Noble employees. Starbucks and Target, Starbucks and Kroger, those are Target or Kroger employees. So part of the brand of Starbucks is the barista. They're very knowledgeable. They have very strict product guidelines, like their coffee is a certain temperature. And, they use, they're very brand oriented. And part of that is the training that goes into the baristas that work behind the counter at a independent Starbucks. Target, Kroger, not so much. So, and I have a friend of mine that's like, he's a Starbucks fiend, like loves it. And when I suggested one time, like stopping, like the closest one is like, oh, it's inside Target. He's like, it's not a real Starbucks. I don't want to, like, I'd rather not have it than go there. Because it impacts on their brand. And like, if you're a mom and you have a couple of kids and you have to go to Target, or you're taking your grandson to Target, it's great because then you can get your Starbucks, but it's not the same as if you went to a Starbucks cafe.
Yeah, really interesting. And sometimes that.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's more behind the scenes. And
Yeah.
so like the Panasonic, I don't know that I'd know it was the Panasonic battery inside of a Tesla. So it's Tesla. The brunt of it is
yeah,
on their
it's
brand.
on them.
Yeah.
It's like,
That's a consideration too. How external public is it going to be? Yeah.
yeah. And some of the, there's a lot, that none of them immediately come to mind. And I went looking for them, I couldn't find them, but P&G has a lot of joint venture where there's a particular niche that they want to go into, but they don't want to be 100%, but so they support it. So, and sometimes they just buy them, like Native deodorant was a standalone deodorant for the longest time, and P&G brought the brand. So now it's actually a P&G product. A lot of people don't know that Native deodorant is actually a P&G product now.
Yeah. Burt's Bees and Clorox.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, the brand, and P&G and Clorox has made that executive decision that they want to let the original brand of those independent companies stand alone, because there's some brand loyalty to that. So when you're doing these strategic alliances, it's very much about the brand and what do you need to do, and who are you going to get involved with, and does it really serve you to do it? And if your goal and objective is to like just make a bunch of money, then that's fine, but you have to do it the right way. Otherwise, there's the potential blowback for it not to work.
Yeah.
So it's very intentional. It's very important to keep those things in mind as you're going into this. And when your attorney says, I don't know, we're not, you pay us to be the Debbie Downers and to put the brakes on it, because especially with entrepreneurs, they're so excited. It's like, oh my gosh, like I had this conversation and it's like, the stars are aligned and it's going to be great. And then, our job as counsel and your job as seeking counsel is to say, well, did you think about this? Or how about this?
Mm-hmm.
Wait a minute. Like, where are the breaks? Like, sometimes we're like, okay, it's great. This is how we need to do it. Sometimes it falls apart at the due diligence phase. Sometimes it falls apart at the term sheet phase. Sometimes it falls apart when you get the documents and the contracts. And my class example, when you get to the contract, because we had the term sheet kind of okay. And this actually was a joint venture, but it works for this analogy. There was an MWBE that owned 51%, and there was a male white company, European company, that owned the 49%. And Initial conversations were great. Term sheet signed off on. We get the documents and it's just like, no, this does not work. It's not in alignment to the term sheet. You know, they wanted to certify the JV, wasn't certifiable the way that they wanted. If they didn't want to certify the JV, then fine. But if they wanted to certify the JV, wasn't going to fly
Mhm.
in either the MBE or the WBE world. And so it went back and forth and it ultimately fell apart at the document base. And sometimes you go into it, you get all the way through, you sign the documents, you start operating, and then they fall apart. And then it's like, what do the documents say? What do we document? How do we deal with this in the documents? And you know, if it's the documents aren't done, or for goodness sake, documents aren't signed,
Yeah.
you know, then it's like, well, you know, now we're in a business divorce. And oh, by the way, they have all of your proprietary and confidential information, and they can do whatever they want to with it because you don't have really the position of strength to enforce it. Kathy, anything for you? I know you've been through a few ups and downs on this kind of stuff.
It just all seems overwhelming to me to try to figure out what's gonna happen 12 months to 18 months from now. There's a lot of moving parts in my company, so I'm like, I don't even know how you cover all those.
Well, some of it's like, you know, some of it's based on historical, but other is, if you don't, if we fail to plan to fail, is that the right phrase?
Yeah.
Yeah, we can plan and we can strategize, and then we come back to it every 3 months. And are we on target? Or are we not? Or did we miss or did we not? It's a constant monitoring. It's not just oh, this is my plan, and you know, I hope it works.
I'm good. Great presentation, Cheryl.
Thanks. And then your worksheet takes you further into like the PowerPoint has all of the presentation stuff in it and all of the factors. And then the worksheet is really like helping you dive into, you know, what is your why? You know, because you can't do the rest of it until you understand what your why is. Like, why is this a good idea? Why do you want to make this expansion? You know, why do you want to go into a different market? Why do you want to go into a different segment of the market that you're already in? And then once you understand the why, then that will help you understand like who's the appropriate person to a company to do it with. And, you know, once you identify the kind of company that you want to do this with or need to do this with, then you can identify who that company is within those the confines of who that company is, kind of company that you need, and who's in your network or who do you need to meet. And, you know, WeBank is a wonderful resource if, you know, you talk to any number of women and you're like, I need a company that does XYZ. And if you ask, you know, you ask 5 women, you will get 5 different references. And then not only will they say, oh, you need to talk to so-and-so at whatever, then they'll like, I'll send an email introduction. Or if you're at a conference, they will take you across the room and make the physical introduction. You know, some of the relationships that I have date back from my very first WeBank conference in Philadelphia. Part of the reason I'm sitting here today talking to you all today is because of the connections that I made with Rhea and Dr. Rhea and with Sheila, neither of whom I knew when I went to that conference. So it's all about relationships. Who you know, who knows you, reaching out to the resources that are available for us here. And then It's the next one. Where do you want to go? Is it geographic? Is it higher or lower in your supply chain? Is it horizontal? Yeah. Complementary offerings of what you already do, expanding horizontally versus vertical. And then what's your go-to-market strategy? Once you know who the company needs to be, the kind of company, you know, if you identified some potential prospects, what's your go-to-market strategy? What do they need? What do you need them to bring to the table? What do they need you to bring to the table? Because it's a two-way street. Like, you have to give as good as you get, and it's a two-way street. And you have to be able to give them something that they need, because you're asking them to give you something that they need. So collectively, what do you both then bring to the table? And what's your go-to-market strategy with it? What's the timing of the entrance? What's the time frame for development? What's the time frame for marketing? Sometimes, you know, to Kathy's point, we miss. Sometimes we have, you know, it'll take us 12 months to get there, and it really takes us 18 months. And if we get to the closer to the 12 months and we're not there, then it's a decision point to say, okay, we're not quite there. Do we stick with it and continue it, or do we just call it a day? And that's part of your conversation. That's part of your communication. That's part of your listening. And they're like, nope, I believe in the project. I understand that thought it was 12 months. It's going to be 18 months, but let's just push on. Let's just proceed, move forward with it. And then what are your specific benefits and advantages? And sometimes that's not financial. Sometimes that's just increased awareness of what your other company does, your primary company. It's additional exposure. So it works great. It's a win-win. The strategic alliance works. It's less risk to expand, whatever the expansion is. But as part of the marketing, more companies and more people are going to know and get to know you and get to know what your other companies are. So in marketing your strategic alliance, you're also effectively marketing your own individual companies. And then what are the pitfalls? Like, are they difficult? Is it a higher barrier to entry to the marketplace? Is it expensive? You know, software development with coders and et cetera are expensive. And do you do that software development here in the United States, or you do it offshore? I have a real estate development company that runs on a blockchain platform that the coding and software development that runs that e-commerce platform. He has 35 people that do the software development and support in Pakistan or India or somewhere offshore. Or do we do it here? What's the cost? The cost differential of doing it here versus there. Do you want to have a commitment to having production in the United States? One of the things we saw during the pandemic is when we couldn't get product from one place to the other, then we had to look for new alliances and access to our supply chain within our backyard, not in New York or California or Europe, because you couldn't get it. If it couldn't be delivered electronically, then you were kind of stuck if you needed product from outside of this region. That's why you ran out of toilet paper. Not to mention the hoarding, but that's why you ran out of things during the pandemic. So sometimes efficiencies don't always work in our favor. So what's our backup plan? And that's part of your strategic alliances. You know, what's our backup plan? If something happens to this company or something happens to this person within this company and the company goes away, what's our backup? If we need this company, what's our backup? And then the things to consider is, you know, your joint objectives and your core values. That's one of the most important things to consider in this process, because you're going to be working and living, doing business with this company. It's not just a supplier. It's not somebody that no one's ever going to necessarily affiliate with your company. You're going to be out there front and center with this company. Do you have joint objectives? Do your core values align? Do your corporate culture align? What are your value propositions, collectively and individually? What are the time, resources, and marketplace that come into play with the strategic alliance? And then, to your point, Christine, making sure you don't spread yourself too thin. If you're a small company and you have this great opportunity because this larger company has identified you as a potential strategic alliance partner because of your particular expertise, do you have the bandwidth within your existing company, or do you need to add additional resources in order to perform? Because the worst thing that can happen when you're working with a larger company is overpromising and underperforming. Because then, you know, then your corporate giants are going to like, see, this is the reason why we don't do business with small companies. They can't do it. They don't have the bandwidth, they don't have the capacity. So making sure that you're not spread too thin. Being clear on your go-to-market plan. What's your go-to-market strategy for whatever you're doing? Making sure your brands are consistent. And then making sure you have executive engagement all the way up and down, not just at the top or the middle or the bottom. You have to have full engagement in order for the strategic alliance to work. And then Christine and Michelle, I can send that term sheet worksheet if you'd like to see that too.
Yeah, I would love it. Thank you.
And anyone else that wants it, it's more detail and it's a lot of more legal stuff. That, you know, it's a worksheet that I've developed and worked on over the years. It's an easy way to identify the terms. And then actually had a client that she was going through an M&A and she sent to me this Excel spreadsheet where she had like taken the different sections of the asset purchase agreement, summarized them in a block, and then had her questions and then their responses and then my questions. And I said, this is a really interesting tool. Like, is this from the other side, the other attorney? She's like, no, they're somewhat tech-based, but she's like, this is I do this with every single contract that I have. I build it into this Excel spreadsheet so that I know I can boil it down to what the agreement says in its terms. And then every time I have a conversation with the other side, there's a new column that says, what was discussed and what they said and, her comments. And so she's like, that's the only way that I can keep track of where all these contracts go. So, you build your tools, you build your toolbox. And this term sheet applies for joint ventures, applies for strategic alliances, it applies for an M&A transaction, because it summarizes where you want to be from a business perspective. Once you answered your first 5 questions, then it kind of, as you start to have these conversations with other potential strategic alliance partners, then it allows you to then dovetail and make sure that everyone's in alliance or agreement before you take the next step further to actually draft documents. Because if it's not going to work, you're more likely going to find it out at the term sheet, the letter of intent phase, than further down the road. Then you just cut your loss.
Sweet. Thank you so much, Cheryl.
Well, you're welcome. Yeah. Happy to be here. I could talk about this stuff forever. Um, and because it's important, and entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs and business owners, they tend to be scrappy, and they tend to try and be efficient. But legal is, especially when you get into these kinds of arrangements, legal is not the area to be scrappy and efficient in. I actually had a client that one of the partners gave me. He's like, I want to do the strategic alliance, and I drafted the agreement for you. I just need you to review it. And I said, where did you get this? He's like, oh, well, I just Googled it, and I found all these agreements out there. So I copied and pasted the things I liked out of all the different ones. I said, yeah, I can tell. You can tell that's exactly what you did, because terms weren't consistent. He hadn't even gone to the bother of changing some of the font on it. Like the fonts weren't consistent. I said, no, this doesn't. First of all, my malpractice carrier doesn't let me look at this. But unless you went to law school sometime in the last 10 minutes, you shouldn't be drafting these kinds of agreements. This is the way for you to ensure that you get yourself into trouble. And it turned out that it was a strategic alliance that they should never have been in and didn't go into. But I said, you don't save time by offering to draft a complicated, sophisticated legal document and just have me review it. That's not going to save me time, because you don't know what you're doing. I'm not going to tell you how to run your business. I'm not going to tell you how to do what you do. I might tell you from a legal perspective, but I'm not going to tell you how to manufacture whatever, what you guys do. But so don't try and practice law, especially when it comes to this stuff. You need the expertise. And in the world of WeBank, you really need the expertise. And not to toot my own horn, but you need the expertise of an attorney that understands the nuances that have to go into the agreements that deal with certified companies. Because there's a lot of great corporate lawyers out there that do not understand the worlds of compliance and certification, and some of the traditional protections that go into these kinds of agreements don't have a place when you're working with certified companies.
I don't understand, Cheryl. Everybody can print and design in Canva now.
I know.
So
I know.
guess they do
Well,
legal work.
except for me, I can't figure Canva out. I do.
All just tongue in cheek, Cheryl.
Oh, I know. It's you just I have a fancy color printer in my office now. I can just do my own stuff, right? I can print it on a label or cardstock. I don't need a printer anymore. But yeah, it's kind of nuts that the kind of corners that sophisticated, intelligent people take. And it's not just legal; it's all kinds of areas. You want to be efficient and effective, and you know a lot about some things, but know your limitations. But yeah, I get a chuckle out of some of the community work that I do at our corporate department, or the corporate headquarters. It's we have a SharePoint and we have Canva out there for you all to use within your chapters. It's I'm not going to learn how to that's beyond me. I'll talk to my marketing person that's on my board that can figure out Canva, because I opened it up once and I'm going, yeah, nope. But if, you know, and Dr. K, if anyone has any questions and after they review this, happy to answer questions or be a resource. And, you know, I have a passion for women-owned businesses in particular and making sure they have the right resources that they need to be successful. And, you know, it's why I like doing these programming and, you know, to ORV's credit, ORV is the only one that's doing these.
Yeah, we appreciate your commitment to the organization and to our WBEs and the commitment to sharing the information that, you know, nobody else is sharing. So the recording of this presentation as well as the PowerPoint deck will be sent out via email to all of those who have registered. I know we had a couple of folks had some last minute commitments and they weren't able to attend, but they're going to watch it later. And I know Kathy's using my Saturday AM watcher, so I'm sure she'll be watching this again. So I know it's a whole lot of information to digest. And, you know, as Kathy said, it can be a little overwhelming, but we don't want to overwhelm anybody, which is why we're definitely appreciative that Cheryl is also willing to, you know, open herself up to be a resource if you have, you know, some quick questions and things like that. So we can definitely share her information. Will be in the deck. I think it's like the second to last slide or so. It's in the deck. And so you'll all have her contact information if you don't already have it. I'm going to share my screen just one more quick time just to share a QR code for our survey. As well as the AI. So Cheryl, you probably saw it on the screen, and I think Michelle, Chris, I know it definitely is Christine and Kathy. I can't remember if Michelle sent me a message as well, but I literally said to myself out loud, "Ooh, I need to heat up some lunch," and it showed up on the screen. And so both Christine and Kathy sent me a message and said, "Your personal conversations show it on the screen," and I'm like, I was just talking to myself, but yet and still it wasn't picking you all up. So it's all right, but
yeah, I saw that. I'm really going, oh, wait, okay. Is somebody making me lunch too?
Right. I was just, you know, you have those thoughts in your mind, like, oh man, I need to get ready to heat up some lunch. And I saw it on the screen. It's like, oh, that was me. Sorry. So if you're watching the recording, you'll see why we were talking about lunch on there. But if you can take a moment and complete the survey. If you're not watching this from your phone, you can scan the QR code and provide us some feedback. If you are watching this from your phone, that's okay, because the survey will come to you via email. I would expect that you should receive your email. Today's Tuesday. I'm going to say by Thursday, Friday at the very latest. So you'll have the recording to the presentation. You'll have the presentation deck itself, as well as the survey. So you can provide us some additional feedback on how we can work together on some ways to make this session and make the session even better, as well as if you have any other suggestions for any other sessions for us. Told you I hadn't eaten and I need to make my lunch. So getting tongue tied. But if you have any suggestions, we'll definitely accept those as well. And we appreciate your transparent feedback that you all give each and every time. And
the girls do that survey so I can report next month.
There you go. Exactly. As far as upcoming events, the only one that I'm going to share today is that registration will be open May 24th for Catch the Wave. So be watching on social media and your email boxes and newsletters and everything else that'll be coming out the latter part of this month. Can't believe this month is already over. But we are excited because Catch the Wave is around the corner because it's virtually almost August. But we have been working really, really hard to put some really great things together for Catch the Wave this year. I'm excited to see as the information begins to roll out. If you are interested in speaking, the call for presenters is open as well. I will drop that link into the chat. Give me 1 second here in case there's anybody here that is interested, or if you know someone who may be interested. We are accepting proposals for that as well. Give me 1 second to pull that up here. Anybody have any questions while I'm getting this? All right. I want to thank you all just for your commitment to the organization. You all have been just instrumental with helping us to get not only these sessions together as well as several other ones. So I want to personally thank you all just for your commitment to ORV and your participation with programming and events, and working together just to make this the best RPO it can be. And with that,
Thanks.
we'll give you 5 minutes back of your time. Thank you again, Cheryl, and thanks everybody else.
All right, see you later.
Thank you.
Right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Cheryl.
Bye.